Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and I've always been impressed by BW Hotelier and their forays in making not only the Indian Hospitality Summit relevant and rewarding, but raising issues which are germane to India, to Indians, and the business. The Indian Hospitality Summit and Awards this year are even more special. They're being held after a gap which was caused by a pandemic, which caused a lot of harm, caused a lot of damage, slowed things down. But like everything Indian, there is an air of resilience. So what is even more delightful is that the theme of the summit is the spirit of resilience, which is so uniquely Indian, so uniquely Indian hospitalities. And I'm delighted that in conversation today I have with me Puneet Chhatwal, who's the Group CEO of the Indian Hotels Company Limited, the owners of the Taj and several other valuable brand marks from Selections to Arma to Ginger. And in Puneet and his team, what one has seen over the last 3 years are forays which are unimaginable. Who would have imagined that he would start Arma? Who would imagine that he would start Dream, Drive, Discover, Delight? Who would ever imagine that Cumin would enter every home with panache and with revenues that even today stir not only the soul but the palate? So welcome, Puneet, and good morning. This has been a remarkable journey for the Indian Hotels Company, and you came in 2017 and bang into 2020, the whole industry is hit with this. What were your initial thoughts when the Prime Minister, rightly so, I have to say, Narendra Modi did a fabulous job with that Janta lockdown, which then the world followed. What was going through your mind? Because you had this army of people, you had guests, and most importantly, the way you looked after colleagues and caregivers. So what was it that was swirling in your mind at that point in time?
You know, to be very honest, the magnitude of the pandemic was not known at that time. And had we known that this is going to last for the next 2 years, I think we would have all done something very different. Thankfully, as you mentioned, the Janta curfew, followed by the lockdown 2 days later on the 24th of March. At that moment, my thoughts were 15th of April, worst case 30th of April, we are done with it. Little did I know that how wrong we can be, but maybe that is how resilience was won, that is how we gathered courage, that is how we were able to sustain a lot of challenges and still kept moving forward.
What was remarkable at that point in time, and I saw it firsthand with you, with the House of Tata, the resilience was not only business resilience, it was also the resilience of the soul. It was compassion. It was empathy. You were looking after your people. You were looking after your guests. I remember how you opened doors at the Taj Mahal Palace and Taj to serving doctors. When you contrast that with the revenue ambitions that the group had laid out from you and for you, along with this compassion and empathy, how did you actually face those challenges, and how did the industry at large come to terms with this reality?
Well, Suhel, very interesting that you mentioned this question, because everyone, every good organization today talks about purpose. And the founder, Jamshedji Tata, over 150 years ago, said that the purpose of any business is serving the community. What he said, to quote and unquote, was community is not just another stakeholder, rather the purpose of the existence of any business. Now that is so deeply inculcated in people. It's a part of the DNA of Tata Group. It's a part of the DNA of all operating companies, one way or the other. Your purpose really translates into your strategy, and the strategy is supported by the culture. That's the triangle which I like very much. And the culture and purpose are always very closely related. And cultures are not built because I came in 2017. The cultures are built by more than a century of doing things the right way. Yes, we all tend to make mistakes, but in general, did we conduct ourselves well? Did we do the right things? Did we serve the community as the most important stakeholder? Were we innovative? Were we progressive? Did we bring Indian hospitality or became the custodian of Indian hospitality? So there is a lot of series of things that happen, and crisis is always the test for everything.
Yeah.
There is an opportunity in every adversity, and every crisis is also an opportunity. But at that moment, our minds were not working that way. It is what we call intuitive leadership of all the top people within the Tata Group, of all the top people within Indian hotels, and somehow it just makes you do the right thing. Of course, you have all the data coming in, all the meetings happening, but there will still be many who would take some kind of a shortcut, but that's not what we did, and went beyond what anybody thought we could do, especially with zero revenues. And I think we must express our gratitude to everyone, because it has paid back already manifold, with people making our brands as brands of choice and the gain in market share that we have had.
But you know, it's interesting because on the one hand, you had empathy and compassion as the moral compass of the House of Tata to live up to. But on the other, you began taking risks. You took a risk with Ama, you took a risk with Cumin. And it's very, very rare when people are stretched both for revenue and people to suddenly take these risks out of a series of innovations. So when you were actually, as the CEO, planning these, what went through your mind? Saying, you know, Cumin could have gone wrong, but thankfully it's turned into a huge business. Ama could have gone wrong. So what were the thoughts that were going into your head, and how was the strategic prism being looked at?
You know, many times I have been quoted saying that no sensitivity analysis in a business school teaches you how to deal with zero revenue.
Yeah.
But it does teach you basic principles of finance. And one thing in all the brands that you mentioned, they were all brilliantly consistent in the model being based on incremental cost and incremental revenue. So we had the kitchens, we had the chefs, we had the staff. We did not use the Western Hemisphere term of furlough. So we had all the people, and it was good to keep them engaged. It was good to keep our customers engaged. So we started Cumin, you know, on the 25th of May in Mumbai, and then expanded it to another 18, 20 cities over the next 3 to 6 months period. And we did virtual celebrations, and you know, one of those people who helped us do these celebrations has become a professional singer. He just launched a song of his, and now in the restaurant that we are sitting in Loya, the Loya anthem has been done by him. It was like like somebody who had no work. He had nothing to do. So a lot of good is also interconnected. It is intertwined. If you're doing the right things and not doing what is always written in the book, because book is written about the past.
Yeah.
Book is not written about the present and the future. But the principles, yes, the principles of finance, the principles of economics, the principles of hospitality, how to serve, what to cook, how to cook, all that is there. That's where the book is relevant. But what to do when there is a lockdown, that a book doesn't say. However, I can share some good news with you. We are capturing all that we did, so that if next time anything like this happens in 20, 30, 40 years, at least people can refer back to what was done at that time when the world was hit with COVID-19.
I think that's a splendid idea. I want to dwell briefly on IHCL, and then I want to move to the national picture, because you know you're also heading the HAI, the Hotels Association of India. Obviously, when I was advising people around the same time, the challenges of business were threefold. Number one, where would you get your revenues from? Number two, what would be the guarantors of the reopening of the world? No one knew. I mean, no one had a clue. Countries went into lockdown after lockdown after lockdown. The third was people who are actually at the heart of any hospitality business, for the first time, everyone was living in fear. Now, I know you started things for guests like an energized menu, wellness, amas became centers, almost like sanctuaries where people felt at home. But when you were looking at the big picture, were you worried? Where did you see the biggest threats and where did you see the biggest opportunities?
In giving up. And one of the credos that I learned in my previous jobs ends with never, ever, ever give up. And that was a sentence that did not exist. So, I mean, we did a lot of things, but basically communication with all stakeholders, having regular, consistent, daily morning meetings as if it's business as usual, whether you use Zoom or Microsoft meetings, having every second day a guest speaker from the outside to talk to us from both within the Tata Group as well as from outside the Tata Group. And I think you did that with our team too. So I think it was like the show must go on. And it's not over till it's not over. In our business, 24/7, 365 days, it's not over. So we kept opening hotels, we kept signing. But as I said at the outset of the conversation, had somebody told us on 24th of March, boy, this is going to take 2 years, I am not sure we would have done what we did.
Or actually, you may not have done the right thing. As you rightly said, sometimes crises force you to imagine the unimaginable and then to go ahead and do it. I mean, Steve Jobs, when he was fired from Apple and then came back to Apple, the first thing he said was that the reason why Apple is successful because there are passionate people who believe they can change the world. Whether they change the world or not is irrelevant. But I thought I saw that same belief in IHCL, in the Taj, in all their brands. One final question on IHCL before we move to the larger picture. The brand has done phenomenally well. Whether it's Ginger, which was smart basics, whether it's selections, there is now an assiduous methodology about getting brands to talk to different stakeholders. Your partners are playing a more active role than they've ever played. Where do you see the brand both domestically and internationally? Now with even Air India's acquisition.
Well, I think one very important factor here we should not forget is people can be very proud of the Taj brand. Now, I'm not talking about IHCL, I'm talking about anybody who is from the Indian subcontinent. Being rated as world's strongest hotel brand 2 years in a row by Brand Finance, which is perceived as one of the most professional organizations in rating brands, is a moment of pride for the nation. Of course, for us too, but I think it's for everyone who's watching us in this hall. They should feel proud that this is our Taj, right? So that's one. Second, for 3 years in a row, with very limited monies to do marketing or sales, we managed to be the top brand, twice number 1 and once number 2, across all sectors in India, again by Brand Finance. And you know what kind of marketing efforts in some of these new businesses came in.
Absolutely.
And that's how for 1 year we got displaced, but we were back again as number 1. So having that, there are a lot of other great organizations, great brands in banking, in consumer goods, in FMCG, even in hospitality. So I think that would not have happened without the challenges we faced during COVID. I don't think it would have happened without all the things that we did, like you said about the 4D, about the Meals to Smile, sending meals in hospitals, without hosting the frontline workers, without not giving up innovation and hope. I think for any leader, whether it is a brand or it is a human being, you cannot show, kind of a give up attitude. You have to be able to exude positivity so that people follow and have a belief that there is a future. And I think most of our brands, most of our leadership team, most of our senior management team, and starting from the group level leadership, did a phenomenal job in saying, okay, let anything come, we will figure out a way and we will support the people and we'll support the cause. And that ultimately helps you build brands which can stand the test of time.
So interesting that you mentioned national play and the fact that ultimately hospitality brands are the gateway to any country. You experience a country by first checking into a hotel in that country if you're from outside. If you're from outside a particular state and you go to the other state, you experience the hospitality, the perceptual values of that state through hospitality. When you sit as you do as the head of HAI, where do you see Indian hospitality today? Where do you see it 5 years later? What do you think are the changes that are being made? What are the pitfalls? And I know that the government is doing a lot of work, and I hope they do more. I've always said the government needs to classify tourism as an infrastructure industry, because if they don't do that, they are being very unfair. And it is the single largest employer of both skilled and non-skilled workforces. So where do you see the challenges? Come December, we will take over the presidency of the G23. G23, right?
G20.
G20. I'm always confused with G23, which the Congress made famous, but G20, correct. So where do you see Indian hospitality as you look ahead?
You know, I'm glad again for this comment of yours, because 3 or 4 weeks ago we had the Diamond Jubilee of Institute of Hotel Management in Delhi, Pusa, where I also graduated from. And our Honorable Tourism Minister was making a speech, and he said, if we can be number one in tech, if we are the emerging number one in healthcare, why can't we be the number one in hospitality? And I think the way I see, at least 3 of the top 10 brands in the world will come from India. And that is not just for the sake of saying, I'm convinced about that, because what has happened is COVID has changed and forced a lot of companies to work very differently, and it has challenged the entire asset light model. So the working with the owners is very difficult, but we are still blessed because most of the brands in India, or the brands made in India, are still having a healthy mix of owning the assets and controlling the assets. Yes. So we don't have to take any shortcuts. So the emergence of Indian brands higher and higher in that top 10 segment is for me like a given. The second thing which has happened is Indian hotel sector has learned globally also, but especially in Asia, I think, with zero revenue, they have learned to put all costs under magnifying glass. So it has become more efficient, and how to do more with less without cutting edges or compromising on service. As you know, Suhel, you travel so much abroad, you know, service can be impeccable, service can be spontaneous, service can be par excellence, but it should not be intrusive.
Yeah, it can't be overbearing.
It can't be overbearing. So sometimes, you know, you have so many people just hanging around. You take a sip of water and they come and pour more. You take a sip of wine, they come and pour more wine in. I mean, those days are like passé, you know, that doesn't exist anymore. So I think the industry has had, that was just a small example, on every front, an opportunity to review its cost base, readjust the cost base. So going forward, you will see whenever companies' results which are publicly listed are getting public, that you will find that the margins are higher and higher despite the inflation. Number 3, India is blessed to have young population.
Yeah.
And people might have migrated into other sectors, but it is for the industry to skill people, and in order to provide jobs very quickly, with skilling of 6 months to 12 months is possible in our sector.
So is the sector investing?
The sector is definitely investing. So for example, there I will go back to Taj and Indian Hotels. We have partnered with CII by 2030 to skill 100,000 people, of which 25% at a minimum will be women. So I think 100,000 is a lot of people. Today, if our workforce is around 27,000 people, it's almost like 4 times more than our own workforce. And we have the largest hospitality ecosystem. That means we are not only skilling for ourselves, we are skilling for everyone. And I think that opportunity is there, that young population, the demographics being on our side, growth, the GDP growth. GDP has a direct correlation with the RevPAR. RevPAR has a direct correlation with the profitability.
With profit, yeah.
So I think all in all, and I can keep going on, there are another 5-6 factors which are very critical and very important for the sector. And as you said it, I would say, like, let's say the fifth one being the G20. I think G20 will definitely position India differently on the global map. It is already growing in prominence. It grew in prominence also during COVID with the vaccine and the way we distributed vaccine to the rest of the world. But now, when those pictures from our wonderful destinations will be flashed across the world, when those meetings will happen, when you are able to host them in the Indian hospitality style, when they come at 5 p.m. to the lobby of Taj Palace and watch the ritual of Tajness on how diyas are being lit, how we pray, how we put tikas on the guest. I think all this will create very good memories with a large section, broad section of people, and that will help make India even a more attractive, not only for leisure but also as a conference destination.
So I want to end, we're coming to the end of our time, I want to end by asking you, as you said, India's prowess in IT is formidable. The House of Tata has TCS, which is the head of the pack. When you look outside, today technology has become a great disruptor, but it's also shrunk mileage. Earlier, when you used to shop, you could only go within a radius of 5 kilometers. Today, because of online shopping, because of technology, I can order things 5,000 kilometers away. When you look at hotels, which ironically have the personal touch, and then you look at technology, how do you see hotel brands like yours or hotel brands like Indian hospitality brands using technology to continue to engage with the customer without becoming impersonal?
I have always considered technology as an enabler, and this is not something new. Only the speed of digitization became very strong because of COVID-19, as that was the only way to communicate.
Yeah.
Having said that, you cannot afford to neglect the relationship capital which is built in person. So a hybrid of relationship capital with the digital capital is the best enabler. I'll give you one small example of what has happened in our sector. We used to have sales offices all across the world to sell our brands.
Yeah.
If you leverage OTAs instead of complaining about them all the time, you have a reach everywhere. So today, without having offices in all these countries, we do have a reach. And what has enabled it is technology that has enabled it. Similarly, Cumin, as you mentioned. Cumin was the first app platform built by a hotel company themselves.
Yeah.
And instead of taking a third party, until date, we work on Cumin with our own platform. And it has been an enabler, because when there was a lockdown, we could do everything which was otherwise impossible to do. So I think digitization, when used smartly, is as good a service provider as the human touch is. And I know that I'm preaching to the converted, because I could not have this interview with you on the website or on the mobile app, because we have some work to do, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's a huge enabler, and we always continuously strive to be better at it. And as we speak, we are also investing a lot of money in the IT, and some places we are blessed that we are able to leverage Tata Digital with the Tata Neu, providing us already a platform which is 5x larger than what we had, and it only started 6 months ago, and very soon it will be 50x
Absolutely.
more than, and how much money we would have to invest. So I think another thing which technology, when you think of technology, when you think of investments, we have to also think about partnerships, and there is no better group that provides a platform of partnership as a Tata Group itself, because we have access to every possible vertical.
Absolutely. Thank you, Puneet. When I look back at the Indian hospitality business profile during the pandemic, the one thing that I took away was the ability not only to be resilient, but the ability to exude compassionate confidence. Indian hospitality has come a long, long way. Puneet talked about overbearing service. Many years ago, I wrote an article, "Will someone please kill my butler?" and Vicky Oberoi had it circulated within the Oberoi group. I think we are slowly replacing intrusion with inclusion. The hospitality industry, to my mind, is the true beacon of India and brand India. I believe the Prime Minister has his heart in the right place. The G20 will enable us to not only showcase hospitality, but the Indianness which resides in our hearts, which prompts us to serve, prompts us to engage, and allows us to relate. I will only leave you with one thought. There could have been no better theme than resilience. You know, aerodynamically, the bumblebee is not supposed to fly, but the bumblebee doesn't know that, so it flies happily. If every pundit in the world and every soothsayer had said, "Oh, India will fail, 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 fail," we're like the bumblebee. We fly happily. May each one of you continue to soar. May each one of you present at this summit be the true brand ambassador of India, of Indianness, and our civilizational legacy. Thank you, and thank you, Puneet, once again. And thank you, BW Hotelier, for being the finest enablers of intellectual capital qua hospitality. Have a good day.